I just really wanted to use this opportunity to make some videos for my Patreon. Really wanted to start making content that's not always about writing. One thing that I really wanted to start my video content series about was about me, who I am, um, being trans, and about trans masculinity. While I talk a little bit, I'm going to be rolling a blunt. I am an OG stoner, and that's what I do. So that's gonna be kind of cool. So yeah, I really just wanted to jump on here and talk about kind of where we are, specifically in regard to trans men or people that identify in any kind of realm of trans masculinity, um, and being able to kind of talk about and share that experience and identity with the world. Specifically, I wanted to talk about something that I saw online recently and I engaged with. There is a kind of, I guess, a famous trans guy model, Laith Ashley, who's really, really beautiful and is well known, I guess, in the modeling world and kind of all of that stuff. Um, he did an interview recently, I guess a minute ago, with some kind of LGBT magazine or media spotlight, I'm not sure. And they asked him, why does he think trans women are, I guess, a little bit more visible in mainstream media representations of trans more than trans men? First of all, I think that question is problematic for anybody to even ask that, kind of pitting this, why do you think one of the other? Um, and we can talk about why we think that is. Lath answered he thinks that due to the socialization of the different ways trans people are socialized as children, prior to or up until medical transition, is how they kind of interact. And so he said, not me, he said that trans women are more vocal because they're socialized as men, or have been socialized in similar ways as cis men, to be more aggressive, more vocal, more outgoing. I feel like, let me go back. That I wouldn't have answered like that at all. Just want to make that very clear. And again, I feel like that question was an unfair kind of setup for him. But I also think he touched on something that we don't talk enough about, or a lot about at all, is, oops, hit my mic. It's this idea of that there's no kind of, that our transition almost happens in a vacuum, that there is no kind of prior navigation of society based on how people have perceived us, that comes into play. And I completely think it does. I talk a lot about being perceived as a little Black girl or a young Black woman at some points in my life when I was younger, and how that experience definitely shapes how I am as a trans masculine person, as a person who identifies as male, as a person who passes, for the most part. Oh, let me start rolling, because I think I just started rambling. That we don't talk about it. And so it was going around on Twitter that people were calling, cancel him, trans misogynist, and though what he said was problematic for sure, I do think there's something. I don't want to get rid of him. I think we could have that conversation and be like, maybe your socialization was different than mine, whatever. But I do think he touched on something in terms of how assigned female at birth, or how assigned male at birth, or how we're born into our assigned genders, about how we're treated, or how society interprets that. There's a lot of research that I actually just kind of started poking my nose into, about kind of like how people speak to babies and how they interact with babies, and that assigned female at birth babies are kind of talked to in softer ways and more nurturing ways, and it kind of sets us up to be kind of perceived as caregivers, or like, someone that deserves a little bit more softness, because we're supposed to be in the world more soft. And these are studies that people with credentials have spent some time doing with babies. There's other studies that show people talk a little bit more aggressive, and this is to babies, this is to infants, this is to us before we're able to know who we are. If before we're kind of aware of gender, I think, though we're born into society's kind of expectations of gender, that pink or blue, boy clothes, girl clothes, kind of things like that. But I think there's something to be said about how prior to the point where we were able to decide our gender, how that factored into what we carry in our memories as the actualized gender that we've stepped into. So I got on Twitter, as I usually do, fake rapper, follow me on Twitter, and was like, though Lace's comment is problematic, I think there's something to be said about how different experiences assigned female at birth people have different experiences than assigned male at birth people. And that we should do a little bit more work into having these conversations, because those expectations of the world that is not trans have definitely affected all of us. Because the expectation of assigned male at birth people to be kind of aggressive and spoken to aggressive and treated differently, that would kind of shift how I perform my trans identity. And that's just my assumption, because my trans identity has been affected by how people, again, have perceived me and have treated me and how I was talked to as a baby girl. I think those things matter. I don't think that it's fair to say, oh, when I share that, and I think that there's something to be said about that in certain spaces that assigned male at birth people are, I guess, are more celebrated in ways that assigned female at birth people are. And we see this with the kind of onslaught of gender reveal parties where the balloon is pink or the smoke comes out pink or the glitter or whatever the fuck people be using. And the parents are visibly upset, That's just kind of high level social media representations of how assigned male at birth people and how assigned female at birth people are kind of differently perceived from jump. Who's to say that, those infants aren't that energy isn't being factoring into how they come to understand their identity. And if that baby ends up being a trans kid or a trans adult, how that treatment or different treatment comes to help them actualize their identity. When I said that, I got told I'm a trans misogynist, which I think we should put a moratorium on that word if we're really not talking about trans misogyny. I think that having conversations about what beyond what trans is in terms of these larger kind of data and facts about people are dying and things, but just really about our lived experience sometimes, having those conversations can really kind of provide some kind of preventative context for the social ills that we have. But unless we're able to have those conversations about things that we really kind of not really spoken about, how can we cancel people and say that they're wrong and that, they're a trans misogynist? And I think that there are multiple times, at least in my personal experience and things that I've witnessed, when trans men in general may say things that are could be problematic or just could be something that we don't really understand because we don't have the language, or something that it kind of goes against this mainstream discourse of what trans is, that they're immediately canceled and called trans misogynist without kind of any critical or nuanced analysis about how maybe they're navigating internal misogyny from being perceived as the improper gender for the majority of their life, or just when we medically transition, we don't the past remains with us in so many ways, in our bodies and our minds and our souls. And so why can't we talk about that? And I think we need to really decide what trans misogyny is, because we can't label trans men or people who even non-binary or however they may identify, and who want to kind of expand conversations of trans. I think Leif really touched on something, and again, I think he gave the wrong answer to the wrong question. Representations of trans is pretty women, and that's something that we don't talk about a lot, and what that means about who gets to be visible and what visibility means, and why is visibility lying in the heart of kind of a problematic space like Hollywood, where things are kind of, about the sensational, about the kind of ideas of beauty that are sometimes not obtainable for us regular old trans people. And so I think there's like tons of conversations to be had about like why certain representations of trans are more visible. And that falls into line. I think Janet Mock had an article once about pretty privilege and how maybe paraphrasing this wrong, but how, I guess certain types of people have privilege because they're attractive. And I think that's what's happening with mainstream representations of trans. I think it's a certain type of representation that is becoming palatable to a mainstream non-trans world so that they can kind of have this entryway into understanding our lives. We're talking about that. It's like kind of an improper way to say why one is more visible than the other. And so that's how I would have answered the question. I look forward to seeing more visibility of all trans people. And I think there needs to be more, I guess, like cross-gender dialogues as well as cross-generational dialogues amongst trans people. It would be really cool if there's like a forum, transgenerational forum with elders, millennials and younger kids. That would be awesome. So yeah, hope again that there can be more nuanced conversations. When I did again share this on my Twitter feed about like how do we understand how infants are treated differently, and how in some places again babies that are assigned male at birth are a little bit more desired. I use the word celebrated and people like, oh my God, I had a heart attack. Maybe I should have said desired in a different way, but I think that plays maybe not a significant role, but a role in how we can better come to understand trans identity. And I was immediately called a trans misogynist. And then a lot of people started beginning to tweet me and was like, it became a conversation about, I think these are talking points that people love it, which are significant, but I don't think that they should be used in every conversation about trans identity. It's like we don't have a right to talk about our other lived experiences. And again, I think that's a problem because it prevents us from having this kind of wide variety of how to have preventative conversations and how to sustain our lives. I think that's all I have to say about that. I am excited to, again, create more content about, just different things I see on Twitter. I think I don't really want to spend the time writing. So spending the time really just, setting up my camera and kind of just going off, it'd be great. We'll see how this is well received, if it will be well received or not. But yeah, again, let's keep the conversations open. Let's engage each other in respectful ways, and let's continue to really support one another and uplift one another. And thanks.